Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast, featuring in-depth conversations with executives, leaders, influencers, and journalists in this dynamic, high-stakes industry. Hosted by Craig Picken, founder of North Star Group, the boutique executive search firm for the aerospace industry. You'll learn how top aerospace executives are developing their people, competing for talent, overcoming challenges, and adjusting to industry trends to drive growth and profits. And now, let's join your host, Craig Picken.
Hey, today we're on the phone with Alasdair Whyte, editor and co-owner of Corporate Jet Investor. Alasdair is one of the premier journalists in the business aviation industry, and just an overall great guy. So, Alasdair, what's happening in London tonight?
I can't live up to that introduction, I don't think. It's quiet now in London. I've just got the children to bed, so I'm all yours.
You're all mine. Well, good. So, hey, thanks for being here. So, good. So, you and I met at Corporate Jet Investor in Miami last couple of years, and it's one of the best conferences I think in the industry. How did you come to start Corporate Jet Investor? And I know you've got a long journalism background, but how did you move into the entrepreneurial role?
So lucky. I met my wife at work at the last company I worked at, and I was a journalist mainly writing about airlines and airline finance, and she worked in the conference division, and she ended up running the conferences about airline finance. And so we met. Fortunately, we were in different divisions, so we didn't have any real hassles working together. And then when she was on maternity leave with our second child, I had quite a nice bonus payout. So it was an opportunity to do something on our own, which we'd always wanted to do. And so we launched Corporate Jet Investor in 2010. And when we launched it, we knew, that we started looking at this in 2008. And when we finally launched in 2010, we knew the market was bad, but we were confident, by 2012 it would be back up into boom again. Mm-hmm. So we were completely wrong about that.
Yeah, no, nothing like starting a new business in a bad economy, right?
I think there's this big advantage, though, isn't there, doing it? It makes you much leaner, and I think if you can survive the bad times, in some ways, I think it was easier for us than a lot of the existing conference companies and publications, because we had a very small infrastructure. It was from a shed in the bottom of our garden. There was, we pretty much started with 2 part-time employees, working with us, both of whom still work for us. And it was just, it was very lean, and it was very cost-conscious. A lot of economy flights to MBAA and staying in really dodgy hotels.
So, I personally think, Corporate Jet, I think CJI, Corporate Jet Investors, it literally is one of the best conferences I've been to. And that's not just blowing smoke. It really is it's a lot of fun. It's a great crowd. You started it in 2010, but you go there, you're the guy. How did you become the guy?
Obviously I'm British, so I have to at least put on false modesty. But, I think we're lucky. I think we've got a nice niche. I think, we're very small compared to a lot of the, to an MBAA or an E-base, an M-base or an E-base or an A-base. And I think that's our USP. Is it's small. It's a nice hotel. We have really good speakers, which we're really lucky. You spoke at the last one in Miami. We've got great speakers and also I think the speakers put a lot of effort in, and then also it's just a lovely community, isn't it? It's a nice group of people,
yep.
And so it's fun spending time, in a nice surroundings with really good content and great networking.
I think the thing that it's really the thing that amazed me the most was you got a really diverse crowd that comes. I mean, you got Kenny Dichter, who comes down every year from Wheels Up. This year was Ken Rickey. You've got the guys, Paul Tao, that started Stellar Labs. You got a lot of CEOs. You've got a lot of big names in industry. Mark Burns comes down from Gulfstream. You've got some of the biggest names in industry. How did you? You obviously didn't get there by accident. How did you create that much buzz around Corporate Jet Investor and getting all those people together? Did you?
I think Yeah, I think it sort of happens organically. One of the things so our London conference has been going the longest, and one of the things which we really worked hard at is I'm really by background, I'm not really an aviation journalist, although I've written about aviation for almost 20 years. I'm a financial journalist, so I'm always really interested in the financing of things, and we're really lucky. We got to know the banks very well, and it was a bit serendipitous where we have great relationships with the banks who come along. The financiers are interested in what's going on in the market, and they sort of end up bringing quite a lot of people in. So in our London event, one of the big MROs had a hangar opening in Switzerland during our London event, and they invited all of the financiers. This was about 5 years ago, and nearly every financier went back to this MRO operator management company going, "I'm really sorry, we're in London," and the guys were like, "What's this event in London?" So I think that was lucky. I think the other thing which is really unique about business aviation, or comparing it to many other industries, is obviously you have the principal or the owner, but other than that, you don't have hierarchy that you have in many other industries. In the airline industry, airlines are king. They're buying. In this industry, OEMs are important, but OEMs are very reliant on good brokers. Brokers are very reliant on good operators. Operators get leads from financiers or from lawyers. So it's an interesting industry where where everyone, there's a lot of benefit. If you're a lawyer who comes along, it's not an industry where bankers will go, "I'm not going to talk to lawyers," or manufacturers will go, "I'm not interested in talking to brokers." It's quite a democratic industry when you get away from the principals or the ultimate owners.
Yeah, that's the thing, and that's what I noticed was you lawyers, bankers, brokers, people doing high-end interiors, every aspect of the industry comes together, and everybody's got something to talk about, and you realize how deep the industry really is, and how many people are out there making their livelihood off of it. And back in the day when business jets were not just out of vogue, but were really politically incorrect. You see how many people could get hurt when you turn against an industry like some politicians did. So I think that's, what do you learn the most? I mean, you go there, you're talking to everybody. You're the guy up there in front. What's the one thing that you take away from these things?
I think it varies at every event, and it's often not the session. There's often a session where you go, "I'm really looking forward to that one," and there's always some way. And I think every delegate who goes to any conference, will look at the agenda and they'll go, "Okay, that one looks interesting. I'm not sure I'll sit in the room for that one. Obviously, I have to." So they'll go, and often it's the ones which I wasn't expecting a lot from are often the ones where you go, "Wow, this is really interesting," or "Wow, I'd never even thought of it." And I think the great thing about business aviation is it's so diverse, and there's so many people adding value that I think a lot of financiers of aircraft weren't particularly worried about things like ADS-B, and then suddenly they realise, "Oh gosh, this is an issue for us." And I think maintenance companies will suddenly go, "Oh gosh, I never realised, that why finance companies care so much," or operators will pick up on a new market. I think one of the things I'm enjoying at the moment is I think we're about to see a golden age of business aviation. And I think the last few years have been so awful, we've probably missed the big shifts happening in the industry. And I think, one of those is membership, which Wheels Up and Jet Smarter and Surfair. And I'm not saying all of these companies will be the winner, but or will survive. But I think that's a massive change. That's up there with the invention of fractionals and jet cards. It's probably more significant. And then ownership's getting better. Manufacturers are now targeting zero unscheduled maintenance. And we're going, they're building digital replicas of engines. They're monitoring them. They've now got the computing power to be able to actually analyze the data which they've been collecting for many years. And then you've got things like 3D printing. It's a really exciting time. And what's interesting is because business aviation's had such an awful 10 years, the lost decade, City calls it, I think we've missed a lot of that happening. And I think, although it will always be cyclical, companies will always go bankrupt, the experience of business aviation is only getting better. And I think in 10 years' time, it's going to be almost unrecognizable.
Do you think it's going to get, in a lot of ways, I agree with you. Just the technology. And, I was talking to somebody last week, about blockchain. Blockchain it's not a matter if, but when it comes into the supply chain and ultimately starts to dominate it. Do you see business aviation, business jets? Do you see them getting democratized? I mean, we talk about Jet Smarter. You see, Blade helicopters up in New York. Some other people are out there trying to do stuff. Do you see it getting democratized at all?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's funny if you Google democratization of business aviation, you actually get more results than if you Google democratization of North Korea, which just shows you there's a lot of hype about this. Yeah. But it's definitely happening. Wheels Up. You've seen Kenny Dichter sell. Jet Smarter has got. There's a huge amount of skepticism about Jet Smarter in the industry, but their numbers of members are astonishing. The 150 flights a week they're doing between Florida and New York area. There's a lot happening. It's never. Business aviation is never going to be as cheap as getting on Southwest or JetBlue, but right. It is definitely coming down. And we the amazing thing is we did a survey of 1,000 Americans random, and I think off the top of my head, 25% think they'll fly in a business jet in the next 10 years, which seems ridiculously high. But to be in the top 25% or top 20% of the US, you've got a household income of over $150,000, $175,000 a year. So it's not crazy. Right. In 10 years' time, if the price point comes down.
Yeah, well, that's what. Yeah, I used to. Yeah, I was doing, a search for one of the big fractionals a couple of years ago, and when I was interviewing salespeople, that was my question: who would you target? And you kind of knew who to throw out. And it's like, hey, look, if you target the guy who makes $200,000 a year or $250,000 a year because he can either A, afford it because they make more than that, or B, they're an influencer in a company. And look, the airlines cannot keep up with the growth in world business. There's so much distress in flying with an airline anymore that the business you would think that business aviation would continue to grow and grow and grow. But I think if it gets there's a good opportunity also. Probably that if it becomes as cheap as Southwest, it sort of kills itself. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I think there's a premium to it being a premium.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I agree completely, and I guess probably what's going to happen at the bottom is there's going to be a blending. That if you've got an ultra high net worth individual or a company CEO flying in a G650 between Congo and Congo and New York, that's clearly a business aviation. Landing at Teterboro using an FPO, that's clearly business aviation. If you've got 20 people jet sharing where don't know each other and are sharing a business jet of 10 people or 5 people, and it's a scheduled flight, but it's in a, Challenger or, 4 people in a Mustang. It's right. Very hard to say where that's not an airline, isn't it? And maybe that's going to be the blending at the bottom. I think Jet Suite's already doing that with Jet Suite X, which is, it flies from an FBO into, it's a phenomenal product. It feels like you're in a business jet. But and it's not an airline, but it looks a bit like an airline.
Yeah, it's sort of, it's like that. It's a modified. It's almost like, hey, when you call, you and your buddies, you fly to New York, and you get a town car or a big Suburban, and you go somewhere. You've got a chauffeur, and it's a little nicer. It's a nicer ride, and it's the difference between a taxi cab and Uber and a town car, and I think it's the whole industry is definitely gonna. How do you think? How do you think that changes how the OEMs think of things? Do you think that changes their focus and what they build, or is it more we're going to build this and you guys figure out how to use it?
I think it's fascinating what's going to happen to the OEMs, because if you look at a Dassault or a Yeah, Dassault has got a nice market. It produces, between 40 and 50 jets a year. It probably doesn't need to change. It's got enough. Yeah, I don't believe that the sharing economy is going to take over the world. I think there'll still be a large number of people who want their own jet, even if they're not, even if they're only flying a couple of 100 hours a year. They want their own jet. They're happy to own it. They want their own pilots. They might put it through a management company. They might have their own flight department. There's always going to be that market. And in some ways, I think the guys at the top, the Dassauts, the Gulfstreams, the large Bombardier products, I don't see them going. I'm sure they'll look at changing, but I don't know if they have to. I think the interesting one might be Honda.
Yeah,
Honda could, Honda's an enigma for us, isn't it? It's a really hard company for any of us to understand, because anyone who's not Japanese to understand. Because,
right.
You worked at an OEM, and the whole idea about, Honda's been working on business jets longer than Embraer has. And they're proud of that. But can you imagine? When you were selling, can you imagine working for a company that has one product that it's been working on for 30 years?
That was always, I remember seeing a press release about, it was 10 years of the Honda jet. Now, I'm not throwing shade at Honda because I'm not that close to it. But I remember seeing a press release, 10 years of the Honda jet, and it still had not been certified. And I was sort of scratching my head on it, and I was going, all right, what's the end game for these guys? And, I'm sure somebody's got an end game. It's not necessarily clear to me, but, maybe that may be the enigma. I don't know.
And you just wonder what they're going to do next. And I think it's it is fascinating. And I bet you they've got a 50-year plan. And I bet they're very good at keeping it a secret.
Yep.
But I think, you wonder if they could do something very different. Embraer's interesting. Textron can get any. It's very interesting. Each OEM has a very different culture and a very different strength. Textron are doing, bringing out lots of different products. Some at the smaller end, some at the big end. Maybe they'll come up with a new people carrier SUV type aircraft. You could probably argue the King Airs like that anyway. Embraer is very innovative. You could see that, Embraer is very interesting. They've done amazingly well. They've got a great management team now, or a management team which is extremely popular. There's a lot of goodwill towards Embraer, I think, at the moment. So they could do something. And of course, there's always the Chinese aircraft coming along that everyone talks about.
Yeah. No doubt. It's the whole. Do you see? Is there room for everybody?
Interesting. I don't see anyone going necessarily, and you look at the ownership. General Dynamics seems pretty strongly, supportive of Gulfstream. Bombardier, is like a boxer who Bombardier gets knocked down every few years and comes back up.
Yep.
I think Embraer has got, Bombardier's got strong government support. Embraer's got government support. Dassauts maybe a slight enigma, but I don't see the Dassault family stopping making business jets. And then, who else is there? Honda seems very committed. They've got huge, I'm trying to think, who else have I missed?
Textron.
Textron, interesting. Yeah. Textron's, but you get the impression that Textron can almost get anything certificated. It's their real strength, isn't it? Textron can, maybe they don't change it that much, but Textron's a very different company than how it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, no doubt.
And so I don't see Textron moving out. So I don't really see, if anything, we're getting more and more for every, Beechcraft that gets absorbed, or every Hawker that gets absorbed and stops making, you get Pilatus coming along.
Yep.
So I think, I'm sure there'll be new entrants coming in.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't see people going away. Do I see somebody getting bought? Maybe. I don't know. Does Embraer acquire somebody, or does somebody acquire Embraer? Pilatus is out there, couple great products. Do they want to get bought, or do they want to stay the same? I don't know. It is an interesting place to look at.
It's a tough from a you know this market. You sold aircraft, but there's a lot of people targeting the larger aircraft at the moment.
Yep.
You've also got Airbus and Boeing. They're an enigma as well, slightly. They make fantastic products, but I think Airbus delivered 600 and something aircraft last year. No ECJs. Boeing didn't deliver any BBJs last year. But they do 5 a year in a good year. That's
right.
Interesting. But then you've got Gulfstream. Sorry.
And then you got they do 5 a year, and they fly maybe you look at the average BBJ that flies maybe 200 hours. They're very low time airplanes. So, but going to Gulfstream, I mean those guys are just knocking it out of the park right now.
Yeah, phenomenally well. I think, although being an OEM CEO there's so much. Obviously, none of the ones who would ever say this, but there's a lot of luck, isn't there, involved? If Gulfstream the 650 has just been a phenomenal aircraft and category-defining aircraft, but they were very lucky that it sold in early 2008. You didn't have to make your next deposit until 2012, so you could hang on in the middle of. It would have been interesting if it had launched. Imagine selling a 650 in October 2008 or November 2008.
Oh.
Yeah, they timed up, and Brian Moss, who was running it at the time, he'll tell you that he was lucky.
Yeah,
it's a great aircraft.
It's great. It's always, hey, look, it's better to be lucky. Lucky to get. How are the buyers changing?
On the 650.
Just in general, how's the corporate jet buyer changing? Younger? I mean, you look at Mark Zuckerberg versus the Barry Diller. You have Mark Zuckerberg, early 30s, 35 years old, versus Barry Diller, who's 80.
It's interesting. So my hunch would be that not as much as it should be. So the average age of a business jet buyer is still quite old. Yeah, I'm guessing 60 is the average age. And there's a lot of people. In fact, I was talking to, actually, Brian Moss is a great example. He used to be president of Gulfstream. He told me that when he was doing the 650, one of the biggest objections he had from buyers were the older buyers going, "Are you promising me you'll deliver this before I die?" Will you really get it? Yeah, I'm 80, and that is an issue, and it is an old, it is an old market. I think one of the interesting trends is it's become much more international, but it's definitely going back towards the US now for a while, and I don't know if I think it will stay international. It's very addictive, isn't it? Business aviation. Once you've tried it, you don't want to go back.
It's
to an airline.
It is. It is corporate crack, as somebody once described it. So you opened up a door. You talked about international. I loved your recent piece on Saudi Arabia. So for us in the United States, tell us what's happening in the world.
Well, it's all about the United States at the moment, I think. I think the United States is hot. It's definitely bounced back. I think Europe's coming back. Brexit doesn't seem to be having a huge effect yet in the United Kingdom. There are buyers out there for business jets. It's interesting though, isn't it? China's still pretty slow. But what's amazing about it, as soon as you start getting international, the numbers of aircraft you're talking about is tiny. So the Chinese fleet is probably, the mainline fleet is probably about 300 aircraft, which is what you get at a busy U.S. business jet airport in one day, don't you? Right,
Peterborough,
Nigeria is, Nigeria was a hot market for a while. It's now a very cold market with a lot of aircraft coming out. Saudi Arabia has been is the biggest market in the Middle East, but there's a huge number of jets have been handed over by people who were guests at the Ritz-Carlton. So that market's tough. The other thing which I think is really interesting about the international market is it's so much more opaque. I've met operators who in the past weren't 100% sure who the actual owner of the aircraft was. They knew roughly, they knew which, but they wouldn't know which family member necessarily owned it. because you put it through a trust, you register it offshore. And offshore registration is not necessarily a bad thing. There's lots of reasons why you register offshore. And it's not about tax avoiding, actually, in this case. So the international market's very mixed. Southeast Asia is going quite well, but from a low base. India's the great big disappointment that's never really taken off. Latin America, there's signs that Brazil might be improving. So it's a very mixed bag, but the US is so dominant at the moment. It was amazing. In 2012, I remember the CEO of one big US business jet manufacturer going to me, thank God for China this year. But now it's, American companies are back and American companies are buying.
Mm-hmm. You think China ever really becomes, you have 300 airplanes over there now. Do you think it ever really becomes a big market? Or is that going to be wishful thinking on a lot of OEMs' parts?
I think China will. I think we had a conference in Shanghai in Beijing 8 years ago, and a couple of Chinese delegates, very well-meaning, very, smart guys. One predicted that by 2020 it would be a bigger market than the US, which at the time was obviously ludicrous. But now it's, China will probably always be 20 years away. Okay. But the US is, the US is such a fantastic place to own a jet. You don't have the, it's easy to take off, fly. It's, the fuel's cheap. You don't have any problems getting permits. Hong Kong is actually a very hard airport to land at.
Yep.
To get a slot to land at Hong Kong, and you can't park your jet there for a week.
Right.
You can compare that with any of the US airports. Like Teterboro or it's just a very different game. There's more airports in Texas than there are more business aviation airports in Texas than there are in China, India, Malaysia, Thailand, and I can't remember the last one, all combined. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was the thing. I remember I was talking to, I think Ty Dubé was the executive at NetJets. They sent him over to develop.
He worked hard as well.
He's a great guy, but I remember they sent him over to China to develop that, and I was like scratching my head. I'm going, that's a very expensive proposition, and I think they figured out it was very expensive. I'm not sure how that. I sort of lost track of that whole effort. And I know there's a presence over there, but I don't know.
No, there isn't really. They've pulled out.
Have they totally?
Pretty much, yeah. I think they got to 2 Hawkers at one point, and they've gone. But the effort that Thai and but the great thing about Shanghai is that anyone going to A-Base in a few weeks, you look at the Bund, and it's got these amazing buildings built by British and German and American companies, all of which lost everything. And I think China is a market where foreigners go, wow, if I can, the old Lancashire mill owner, if we can only convince, Chinese people to add 1 foot to their shirts, we'll be able to keep the mills of Lancashire running forever. China's just a very hard market to crack.
It is. Yeah, it's just a hard market in general. I think a lot of U.S. companies have figured it out. A lot of European companies have figured it out. You tread cautiously. I don't want to say tread cautiously, but it's a whole different game than it's a growing country, and it's a whole new game that needs to be figured out, bit by bit. So, it's interesting. Do you see Saudi Arabia ever? Does the Middle East ever become a real player again, or do you think what the current events over there have really stifled?
I was talking to someone who's moved over. I better not identify even which company he works for, because he'll never get to visit Saudi Arabia again. I think I'm pretty much, won't be going there for 10 or 20 years after my article. But he's moved over there with his family from London to build a business out there, and it is tough, But the Middle East is important. Interestingly, the Middle East fleet shrunk last year, by a couple of percent. The Asian fleet grew significantly by a couple of percent. But we're talking probably the equivalent of 0.01% in the US is more growth there is more significant to business aviation. It's the Middle East will come back. I guess the other thing is that it's very easy for us all to go, or people outside the region often go, it's a dangerous region. And I remember a guy from Beirut saying to me, this is like people saying, I'm not going to go to, it's big area. It's like people from going, I'm not going to visit, this was in the 80s, so I'm not going to go visit, Paris because of the IRA in London. Or I went to Helsinki because it's a big region, and there's some hot spots. Dubai seems to be doing okay. Qatar is doing terribly since the blockade. Saudi Arabia is going to Saudi Arabia is going to have to work out something, because you don't annoy the banks that it has annoyed by taking aircraft that were financed.
Right.
Payment. You have to admire that though. If you're stuck in a hotel, you're under lock. You're under lock and key, and you're negotiating your way out. And you say to someone, "Well, I'll give you my business jet," and it's financed. You've got to admire the cockiness.
Here's
worth $100 billion. Yeah.
Here. If you let me check out, I'll give you the keys to my jet. And understanding that Citigroup has got it all financed, and now that's a whole new international incident, right? So.
Well, actually, interestingly, I think Citi are one of the banks which haven't got any exposure. But you're right. But then you can't. The banking community, you can get away with one or two things, but then when you next issue a bond deal, and every major bank goes, well, we're advising everyone not to buy this because you owe us.
Yeah.
They'll get paid in the end.
I'm sure they will. Yeah, somebody will make it quietly go away. It's funny how it always happens. These things tend to, get right somehow or another. So, hey, let's shift gears a little bit. So you rub elbows. I mean, quite frankly, you've got a lot of horsepower at the conference, and you rub elbows with these guys, and they're all your friends. I've seen you out there. How did you get to that point? What would you suggest? What would you tell a young, person starting a career, or somebody who's kind of early career who wants to get to the big chair? How do you do it? How do you make these people not only your clients but your friends?
Showing up, I think, is important. I think it's in the what they don't teach you at the Harvard Business School. I remember going to you show up, you get to know people. It takes time, doesn't it? It takes, it's a lot of, and the interesting thing is, I've got close friends who I see less than I see, lawyers who I know, or bankers, and they're friends as well, partly because you're spending a lot of time with them. So I think showing up's one thing. I think the other interesting advantage we have is that we're very neutral. We're not competitive with any of those people.
Right.
We don't sell aircraft. We don't do recruitment. We don't broker finance. We don't, so I think we're neutral, and I think we're impartial, and I think that helps. So if I was, but I think showing up, obviously I'm not showing it in this interview. Listening is interesting as well. It's a good way to find out what's going on. If you're young and you're coming into something, I think people like listening, people like being listened to and their opinion taken. Obviously, I'm not doing that now with you.
Well, I'm asking you the question. So now it's your time. Now it's your turn to talk. I know you do a lot of listening. So,
I think that's. I think showing. I think also. I think it's an industry that really rewards enthusiasm. I think if you're enthusiastic, you're interested, you're prepared to commit to it intellectually. I think people like that. What would you say?
I think, like you said, show up, listen, etc. And the one thing, do you think that we as an industry, we've always been the stuffy, suit and tie guys? Do you think, do we need to loosen up a little bit? Is that happening? Or do you think that the stuffy suit and tie guy, works for us?
I think
I got through girls in there too. So, there you go.
Yeah, and that's I think every industry is fascinating, and I think this is a particularly great one. I guess it's well, I don't know if we are a suit and tie. Have you ever seen Kenny Dichter in his?
Oh man, everybody's a jacket and tie, and he shows up in a tracksuit, and he's like he's the man.
And I don't think I could carry that. But I think, the other interesting thing about, I think, is, a sport I really like is rugby. And one of the reasons I really like rugby is there's a position for everyone. If you're tall and thin, if you're fast and, skinny, you go out on the wing. And in some ways, what's interesting about our industry which is probably different to some other industries, I'm thinking maybe, is that there's so many different varied roles. So if I've got, if I'm with the safety officer or the post holder at an operator, I don't necessarily want them to be an amazingly casual.
Right.
But then if I'm with someone like Kenny, who's running Wheels Up doesn't operate any aircraft. It uses Gamma for that, which I think is super smart.
Yep.
And Gamma doesn't buy aircraft because Marwin and is not the salesman that Kenny Dichter is, and he'll tell you that. He'll say it doesn't make sense, and I think that's maybe. I know I've got away from the suit and tie. That's another thing which is really cool about this industry. There's so many different roles, and it's not one type of person, is it? So you have fantastic sales guys, at the OEMs and at brokers. You've got fantastically clever engineers and you've got sales guy engineers who are great at selling. You've got, it's an interesting industry for that reason.
Yep. You got some great bankers out there who are fantastic sales guys. I mean, that's what I think I enjoy when I see it. When I look at the industry and I go, and it's like, wow. You really do see a great mix of folks and personalities and Kenny is, I don't think 1% of the population can get away with what Kenny gets away with. He's just so good at being Kenny. I mean, he's a character of all characters. It's to be said.
The interesting about Kenny though, which is something else I think would be for a young person going into the industry. Kenny is remarkably, I don't think Kenny fakes. Kenny loves dealing with people, and he's the sort of guy who'll follow up and go, you say, Kenny will follow up. He'll check on, he'll ask how your family is, and you get the impression he really cares. Do you know what I mean? He's not he likes dealing with people, and he follows up. He's never rude to. One of the interesting things we have is, a bit like when the old recruitment thing about being rude to the receptionist.
Right.
We get to see people come into the conference, and we're a pretty small team. So if someone's rude to someone we had a journalist who came to one of our conferences a few months ago and was quite rude to everyone, and everyone was going, they want a different name badge or something, and they wanted, and everyone goes, this guy's awful, or this woman's awful. Kenny doesn't do that. Kenny's, beautifully polite to everyone, nice and friendly and cheery, and actually lots of people are, like Michael Amalfitano is. And I'm struggling to think of many people in the industry who don't do that. In the airline industry, it was quite common for the person looking around the room for someone more important to talk to, and being rude to I can think of an amazing aircraft sales guy on the commercial side who was terribly rude to people, but would turn it on for a customer. And I think that's an important thing. Be nice to everyone. I think helps.
Be nice to everyone. Yeah. And the one thing I love about Kenny is, I'll just use Kenny. His enthusiasm. Yeah. For everything and everybody is off the charts. I mean, that's the one thing. If you could, like I said, he's a character, but if you could just, recreate his enthusiasm for everything and everyone, that's a great.
He's someone you definitely need to do one of your podcasts with.
Yeah, I got to get him on here. I got to figure out one day how to get him on board. So I'd love to do that.
I'll email him. He'll do it. He'd love to.
All right. Yeah, I'll call him up. I got to call him up here soon and get him on. But so how do people? We're coming up on 45 minutes. I promised you I'd keep it to about that. I know it's late over there in London. How do people get a hold of you?
So we have a website with a free newsletter. We've got it's the laziest way to keep up to date with what's going on in the industry. We send one email once a week. With a bit of editorial, trying trying to find an issue or look at something differently, and then just quick links to all the big stories of the week. So it's the lazy person's way to keep up with what's going on in business aviation. We have a website with stories, and again, I think we've had a major change. We've got a couple of new editorial people coming aboard, and we're sort of trying to do more insight pieces, more analysis, rather than just every press release in the industry. And if we have live events in London, Dubai, Singapore, and Miami. So, and our conferences, everyone's welcome.
So your most recent conference, you just had Corporate Jet Investor London. That was last month, correct? Or 2 months ago?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And the next one coming up where?
Dubai next, for the Middle East market. And then Singapore in June, and then we'll be in Miami in November.
Miami in November, which is awesome. So look forward to seeing you there as well. So the website's corporatejetinvestor.com, and y'all also focus on helicopters and yachts as well. You've got that vertical too, correct?
Yeah. We always launch planning to see helis, and we're amazingly lucky with Richard Santulli launched a helicopter lessor the same week we launched. He sold his for $1.8 billion to GE. I don't think we're quite in that ballpark yet. But he's and that led to a fantastic growth in helicopter investing. Although that market's dire at the moment.
Yeah.
Maybe because thanks to the oil price. And super yachts was genuinely led by a couple of our supporters of our jet conference going, you have to do yachts. So that's how we ended up in that market.
So you got a couple of businesses, and business is good.
Yeah, it's great. I think we're lucky. We're growing, and we, and I think because we've grown in a terrible market, we just got to hope that we have another, 20-year boom run now.
Oh, like you said, if you could do it in down times, you'll do it in great times. And I think the best times are still ahead of us. So, I guess we'll find out. But hey, look, I appreciate you being on today, and I look forward to seeing you at the next conference, and look forward to staying in touch with you as always. Thanks for being.
So much for coming in. Well, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm loving your podcast, and also you did a great presentation in Miami. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks. I look forward to coming back.
Yeah,
appreciate you being here, Alasdair. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Craig. Take care.